Hello, everyone. Very warm welcome to another episode of Psychology Talks. And today I'm gonna give you a big announcement that next week my book will be launched. So please watch out, and I'll be sharing the link for the launch event and the launch party and some other events. So keep a watch on my profile, and if you haven't subscribed to my website thepsychologytalks.com, then you should please do it, because I will be sharing the news and the details about the book on my website. So I'm very, very excited about my book. And as you know, that I've been doing this, I've been working on the book for 20 years. And finally, it's done, and it's time to share the book with you. So keep an eye on that. Okay, now coming back to today's topic of psychology talks, and like a lot of people actually ask me, and they also want to grow business, but then they somehow miss, and they seem to actually stuck in the pattern where they want to grow the business, but somehow they end up doing the same thing and have some losses, or sometimes they have to give up. So today we're gonna discuss that how to scale a business, because managing a business is not an easy task, because once you try any venture, it's not only just that particular task. You need to manage sales, you need to manage finances, you need to manage every other aspect that is around the business, and to grow the business. Because like I've seen, like many people, they do manage to promote the business successfully, but at the end of the day, when there is a time to deliver the product or services, they go crazy. And there is the main, like, the problem lies that you need to be consistent, you need to have a proper strategy to move forward. And that's what exactly we're gonna talk in today's session. And that's why I have invited a highly experienced and highly skilled business coach. He has more than 30 years of experience of helping CEOs to scale their business. And one thing that I really like about him, that teach the business to grow the business in a like normal way. He adds the aspect of fun and humor, so you don't feel tired and you don't feel so exhausted. So let's welcome Gary Frey. Hello, Gary. Thank you so much for joining. I'm so honored to have you today.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be with you from Charlotte, North Carolina, in the United States. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
you're most
So you,
welcome.
you, you said
Yeah.
that we make it fun. So, class, we are going to talk about scaling a business. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I think business should be fun, and it can be
Yeah.
fun, but it's
Yeah,
hard.
absolutely.
It's
Yes,
hard.
yes, absolutely.
It's not
Because,
for the faint of heart.
yeah, because a lot of people feel the pressure, and they think that it needs to be done, it has to be done. And when you have that mindset that you need to perform well, you feel a lot of pressure. And sometimes, that I feel that you need to go in the flow, you need to just enjoy what you're doing. And then I think it becomes more easy, and it becomes more rewarding and more fulfilling, right?
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert at it. I'm still learning at age 60. I
Oh.
did my first turnaround when I was 28, and I
Mhm.
had no business. I had no understanding of what I was doing, and I had no credentials to do it. I'm a college dropout, and I was a
Mhm.
graphic designer. And
Oh.
I mean, I had no credentials whatsoever. And so we just did basic things. But my first introduction to a coach was when I was 28 years old. And my
Oh.
business partner was 20 years older than me.
Mhm.
He had done a Hail Mary. It was a desperate move. He was basically bankrupt.
Oh.
And he didn't have the money to go bankrupt. In the United States, it costs you money to go bankrupt, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But I was given equity to help turn it, and we did in about 9 months, really simply by a number of things. But the guy that found me was his
Mhm.
coach, and he was $10,000 a day plus expenses, and you paid him up front.
Oh.
That's in
Oh.
1991.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah,
So that's
that's.
about $24,000 in today's US dollars. Like
Oh.
crazy.
Yeah, that's.
But he was desperate. He was very
Mhm.
desperate. And so from that point on, I got introduced to, and that first check I didn't have to write. All the subsequent checks I did. And so I had
Okay.
to put my money where my mouth was too.
Mhm.
Um, but I learned at that tender age, one, how difficult it was and how lonely it is to run a business because everybody
Yeah.
quit after we had to
Yes.
take
Yes.
massive pay cuts and everybody quit except for him
Yeah.
and me. And so we had to
Yeah.
do everything.
Yeah.
Everything was on our shoulders.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so I understand what that is like, and it can feel like a cruel job and not a business. And there are
Mhm.
times that it is. So
Yeah.
from that point on, I learned a lot of things. And unfortunately, I caught my partner embezzling twice.
Mhm.
I,
Mhm.
I caught him with his hand in the cookie jar one too many times.
Mhm.
And he was a good guy, but he had just made a series of bad mistakes and he got
Oh.
greedy. And
Uh-oh.
so I learned a lot in that
Mhm.
short period of time. I was with him for about 3 years, a little over,
Mhm.
and then I had to leave. I just, I couldn't stay in partnership with somebody that was lying to me and stealing.
Yeah.
It's
Oh.
lying and stealing. That's not; those are two not
Yeah,
good things.
absolutely.
So anyway, I've learned a lot, and I still keep learning. And I've gotten to
Mhm.
run a few more other businesses since that time.
Mhm.
But I'm happy to
Yeah.
share a
Yeah.
few tricks and a few things that I've learned, and some of
Mhm.
the biggest problems I suppose that I see consistently with business owners, if you want me
Mhm.
to.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. In fact, before actually we start the proper discussion, I mean, of course, you just gave a little bit of introduction, but how you actually get into this? I mean, you said that you didn't have the credential and you were a graphic designer and you wanted, so
Yes.
you were not, of course, it seems that you were not fit for it. But then how you get into it and how you got the courage to actually follow through with this.
Well, it was desperation. I had two little children at the time. My wife was home with our children,
Hmm.
and I had just lost my job with a very large ad agency, and we were well known.
Hmm.
We had Coca-Cola as one of our accounts, and we had some very big accounts. And this is in the middle of kind of nowhere in Kansas in the United States, in Wichita, Kansas, not a huge city. But I was desperate. I lost my job at the beginning of December, and by the end of December, I was freelancing. But I needed health insurance. We don't have health insurance that just automatically happens here in the United States. You have to have a job. So I kind of got thrust into it. I had been identified by this very expensive coach. He had been asking around town, and my name kept coming up.
Hmm.
So I was qualified to be. I was a good designer,
Hmm.
but that was it. And I had my own little freelance business on the side, but it was just me, and so it really wasn't a business. Um, and then because we grew this company and we had some notoriety and we won some international accounts, that helped, but I still saw myself as an ad agency guy.
Okay.
You know, I was still a designer in my mind. I'm a designer, and I just got lucky, and just used some basic blocking and tackling skills to turn the company around.
Mm-hmm.
But what was interesting is now that I'm 60 years old
Mm-hmm.
and I look back and I see these patterns, I'm like, wow. So I had the same dilemma that every business owner has early on, which is too many roads lead to me. And
Yeah.
that's where you start feeling trapped.
Yes.
My partner was a very good PR person, but he was kind of lazy. I mean, he's a good guy, but he's kind of lazy.
Yeah.
So I had to run everything else except for public relations. And at that time, there wasn't even a term called integrated marketing,
Ah.
but that's what we did. We had so we did design, advertising, PR, direct mail, that kind of stuff. And we were just getting into the digital age in 1991. You know, it's just
Yeah.
early in those stages. So I was actually interviewing with Coca-Cola in Atlanta because I wanted to live there. We had family that was in that area. And so initially I said, I don't want equity in the company. I'm interviewing in Coca-Cola. Actually, the job I was up for got frozen with the Gulf War, believe it or not, in 1991. So the job I was up for got frozen. So I said, I'm interviewing. I don't want the equity. I'll help you turn the company. I think we can do it. But I'm going to move to Atlanta once this job opens up.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, okay, I'll still hire you. So we did turn it. And then I said, listen, if I'm going to go to Atlanta, and if I leave you, you need 3 people to do what I do. Because I was doing 3 full roles and I was working crazy hours, but I
Yeah.
said, we need an account person. So that's a good sales, like communication person with a client. So, you know, kind of a customer service and salesperson. We need a writer because I was writing everything, even though I was an art director. And you need an art director. You need a
Yeah.
designer. We couldn't afford 3 more people, so I went to the university and had a friend that was a professor there, and I said, I need young talent that's really, really good. And so he identified a couple people, a writer and an art director that was very good in the digital world,
Mm-hmm.
early adopters. And so they were inexpensive. We could afford them. And we gave him an opportunity. And then I hired a good buddy of mine who was the bass player when I was a drummer in this band. and
Oh.
he wanted to leave his company. And he had never been in our business, but he had been a reporter on television. He was on a
Oh.
news,
Mm-hmm.
and he's brilliant. And he's a quick study on so many things. I thought he'll be great. So I've got my position covered.
Okay.
So that I got forced into doing that, and I had to cut my own salary to make that happen. That's one of the biggest things early on for anybody that's trying to scale their company.
Yeah.
Look at how many roads are going to you.
Yeah.
And if too many roads are going to you, you got to decide what's my best and highest usage. Because I like to do all of those things, but I had to say what's my best and highest usage. And I actually planned on leaving the company because it didn't have my name on the door yet.
Okay.
So we hired those people. I sacrificed to do it. Guess what? We had fun and we kept growing.
Yeah, that's good.
Hey, and
Yeah.
then I decided, you know what? I'm having too much fun. I'm not moving to Atlanta.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
very
we
good.
changed the name of the company and put my name on the door until I caught my partner
Oh,
pilfering the take. So
yeah.
anyway, but that when I look back on it, like that's a simple but very fundamental thing
Yeah.
that a lot of people get stuck on. Oh, well, I can't afford to hire somebody.
Yeah.
Well, you might have to cut your salary to do it, or find interns
Yeah.
that can do some of the work that is not your best and highest usage.
Mm-hmm.
I've interned for no money before. Sometimes you get paid internships, sometimes you don't. But you can find people that are eager treat them well, give them responsibility, give them clarity on what they need to do, let them do it. And then you do the stuff that you love to do.
Yeah.
So really simple.
Yeah, it may sound simple, but the thing is, like at that point in time, I think the people are so much stuck as they feel that they are short of, they don't have enough resources to hire
Yeah.
someone, and I think one more thing that I have seen, like a lot of people that they start their business, and as you mentioned, I think they face the same dilemma that they want to grow. They start taking more, let's say, projects, or they start doing offering more services, but at the end of the day they don't have the enough resources to actually serve them, or to
Yes.
give them but the problem is, again, to find the right talent again would be the most difficult problem, and then again managing their team. So how do you manage that? Because again, like for example, if let's say someone has high goals, or they want to grow phenomenally, but the thing is quality cannot be compromised, and once you um,
Yes.
like give the task to intern or something, you may have to actually spend more time in training them, and yet not be able to actually get the same quality. So how to manage this sort of dilemma?
It's a huge dilemma. Um,
Yeah.
and so it's simple, but simple does not mean it's easy. There's a
Yes.
difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But here's what I found. Um, the job that where I was unemployed, that I had been at this really well-known ad agency, when they needed a senior art director. So this is before I went to do that turnaround, and they were the coolest place in town. They did the most award-winning stuff, and somebody said, "Hey, they're looking for a senior art director. You ought to go."
Mhm.
And I didn't have the confidence in myself to do it. But my wife said, "You need to go because you're miserable where you're at." So I did.
Okay.
And in the design world, you show your portfolio. It's your
Yeah.
portfolio of work. But you can't always tell if all that is that person's, or because there's a collaboration that
Yes.
happens in all
Yeah.
really good work. So you don't
Mhm.
really know like how much of it was, and a lot of people claim stuff that's not their own, quite frankly,
Absolutely. Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
world. So they gave me 3 exercises, and they said, "Gary, it's on the honor system. We want you to limit yourself to an hour and a half
Hmm.
for each one of these assignments." One was a television commercial storyboard. Another one was a newspaper ad, and another one was a brochure. And so
Okay.
they had kind of a creative brief for each one. And they said, just limit yourself to an hour and a half. We just want to see how you think.
Hmm.
And I thought, oh man, I don't want to do that. But what kind of a thing is this? But
Yeah.
I did it.
Hmm.
And then I thought, all of my stuff is terrible. I had no confidence in it. I thought it was terrible.
Hmm.
And I didn't want to even go back for the next interview to show my stuff, because I thought this is terrible. But I went because I gave them my word. So I went,
Hmm.
and they liked it. They're like,
Okay.
and I was kind of embarrassed because I'm like, this isn't that good. But they
Yeah.
put a time limit to see if you're going to cheat.
Yeah.
That's one thing. So
Yeah.
they're looking for integrity. They had some little landmines built into this thing that I didn't know, and I wasn't smart enough to think about, evidently. But what was interesting is, because they liked how I thought, and I thought my chicken scratches weren't that good on my drawings or whatever. I thought, wow, well, they hired the real me. What was
Hmm.
interesting is I just soared at this place. My work won all kinds of awards, and it was like throwing afterburners on. I just shot up like a rocket because I had confidence. So I actually start doing that. I look for people, and I call it, do they have batteries installed? Do they already come with batteries, or do I have to go and install the batteries and then give them directions on what to do all the time? If somebody doesn't come with batteries and they don't show some initiative, I don't care
Yeah.
what their resume says. I don't know. I don't care how badly I need somebody that can just fog a mirror because they're alive. No. And that's the one piece of advice I would say too. When you're hiring somebody, find somebody that shows initiative. So remember the consultant and the coach that I said it was $10,000 a day plus expenses, and he wasn't in town, so he flew first class from Richmond, Virginia, halfway across the country to where we were in Wichita. So it was not a cheap flight either.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm like, well, each time we brought him in for a day, by the time it was expenses and everything, it was about $12,000 or $13,000
Oh.
for a day, and it's double that for 2 days. So we always limited it to 1 day usually.
Yeah.
But we would bring him back a couple times, 2 or 3 times, sometimes a year. Well, at that time, a new Macintosh workstation was about $12,000,
Yeah.
and plus the software licenses.
Mhm.
And we didn't cheat on that. So like, oh man, well, as we grew, hey, we need another body to do all this stuff. Hey, there's another $12,000 plus the software. And many times I'd be like, it's either new computer or bring back Stuart.
Yeah.
And my guys would always say, we need a new computer. And I would say, I know, but I think we need Stuart on this thing because we're chasing this piece of business, etc. And I usually chose to bring in Stuart. Well, as we were growing, we desperately needed another person. And this one guy kept pounding me. Like, he's like, Gary, I want to work for you guys. You guys are the coolest thing. I really want to work for you. And I said, man, I can't afford to hire you.
Yeah.
So he says this, hey, I'll work for you for a month for free.
Wow.
Batteries installed. And I said, I can't do that. And I said, I don't even have a computer. I have my own computer and my own software licenses.
Yeah.
He just destroyed every barrier that I threw, and I hired him. And plus, his name was David, and I already had 2 other Davids, and we only had about 12 people in the business.
Okay.
So I'm like, are you kidding me? Now I got to have another David. And so, but what was funny is he never went without a paycheck. He was willing to go for free. That's what we thought we were going to have to do. But we were able to bill him immediately. Mm-hmm. And he brought his own computer, had batteries installed. He removed all those objections. So that's the only time that's ever happened in my career. But I'll never forget David Hoffman is his name. I'll never forget that because that guy showed so much initiative. And so I look for that. And so my advice to anybody out there, the most critical thing is to understand what you love to do, not just your strengths.
Yes.
What you love to do. I call it what you thrive. And you could do this. This is I do this. I charge $7,500 a day, so I'm cheaper than Stuart was. But split the piece of paper. This is Bonehead Kansas Simple. Split the piece of paper in half with a line. Draw. It's a T-chart. At the top, write thrive on the left side. Write wither on the right side. Put all the stuff that makes you come alive. All the things that you love to do. The environments. The kind of people you like working with. Blah blah blah. Do you like variety? Do you like the same thing? Make it uniquely you and truthful. Then go to the stuff on your wither column. Again, this is not strengths, weaknesses, because many times the stuff in your wither column is stuff that you're really good at, but you're burned out on doing it. You just kind of like punch that ticket, you're done with it. Put that in there. And then do the same with people that you're hiring or that work in your company. Find and move as much of the stuff off of you in that wither column to somebody, because I guarantee you there are people that actually like to do those things. They thrive
Yeah,
in those things.
yeah,
That is the most succinct and biggest gold nugget that I have, that
yeah.
I've seen work for everybody, from big companies that I've coached.
Mm-hmm,
Yokohama Tire in Japan,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
based here in, well, they're based in Japan, but I worked with the American team in Los
Yeah,
Angeles. Those kind of things, down to small, small companies that, a
mm-hmm.
dozen people or 100 people, and
Yeah,
everywhere in between. But that's the one thing.
yeah. That's
Understand what
true.
you love to do. Get rid of the stuff that's in your wither column. Find other people to do it. And maybe it's outsourcing it. Maybe
Yeah,
it's finding people in other markets. Now, with all the virtual assistants and all the stuff that's
absolutely.
available now,
Yeah.
very, very easy to do. And it's a lot more cost effective. But you
Mm-hmm.
have to be smart about what you love to do as the owner first. And then go with your management team. Do the same thing with your management team.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's
That's
my
really.
biggest advice.
Yes, definitely. This is actually so amazing because I think, first of all, it's very important to have clarity that what actually do they want. And that's what I think this your plan does, that once they do um, write down that what do they like to do and what are the abilities or what are the things they can actually pass on to someone else to do that. So this is actually amazing. Now I move to the other question. I would say that, like, you must have
Yes.
worked with so many companies. So what you have observed, that why these business fail, even the biggest business or something. So what are the major things
Mm.
that actually led them to fail in anything?
Well, unfortunately, I've been a part of a couple,
Hmm.
and I've been with some really, really good leaders and some really, really bad leaders. And it starts with leadership. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
management sets the tone, and you can have some really nice people and good people that made some really bad decisions. And my partner embezzlement was one of those things. He was a good dude. He just made some, he justified certain things in his mind, and they tripped him up.
Yeah.
Um, but I also saw, like, lack of integrity at a leadership level, and we can become blind. Again,
Hmm.
this friend, he was a friend of mine. He was almost like a father to me. But he became blind because he was not willing to be transparent, fully transparent with those around him. He had
Hmm.
secrets. And
Yeah.
so I would say that is the number one thing. And
Hmm.
pride is right there with it.
Yeah.
Because when we're not coachable, we're not teachable. And I'm not saying you got to go out and hire a Stuart Sanders $10,000 a day coach, but you should have people in your circle that are peers that you can trust, that you can drop your guard and say, what am I missing?
Yes. Yeah.
The most successful CEOs that I've ever worked with all have that one common thing. They're humble, they're teachable, they're insatiable learners,
Yeah.
and they have learned how to pry their death grip off the steering wheel and let other people and empower good people. But it doesn't give them a pass. Clarity on what's a measure of success, have the right people in the right places, let them do what they need to do. But um, so that's one. And another one that I've seen, and again, it goes back to leadership, is cash flow.
Hmm.
They a lot of times, and especially if you're working with big companies. At one point, I was working with GE Lighting. They had a 120-day pay cycle. Well, that kills small businesses. It
Yeah.
kills them. Well, and they would have this big lever and say, well, if you want to work with GE Lighting, that's how we do it. And they would typically say 90 days, but they'd stretch it out to 120. And so you had to pay your vendors, you had to pay your people.
Yeah.
And at some point, if you don't have the courage to go, no, I'm not playing that game.
Hmm.
And Price increases are another one. A lot of times people don't know really what their margins are, and
Yeah.
they have concentration risk with one big client or two, and they're afraid to awaken the sleeping giant, but they're losing money on doing business with them, and they don't know it. They don't even want to know it.
Mhm.
Knowing their finances is another thing that I see with good people, with good intentions, but they're asleep at the wheel on important metrics, on profitability on their company, cash cycles. Um, those things I see a lot
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And what I actually get from your message is that the three major things is very important. Like to have a successful business, or any business can actually go down the drain if it's not there. Like ego, integrity, and transparency. I think these are the three key elements which actually makes or break any business.
Yes.
Yeah,
You
and
can't attract and retain good talent in this market. Now, yeah, I mean, things in the United States are really tight from a talent standpoint. During COVID, we had the great resignation. We had a lot of people that
absolutely.
left the workforce. And so, you know, um, I know for a fact you cannot attract and retain good talent without good leadership and integrity. It doesn't mean that you're perfect. None of us are. None of
Yeah,
us are.
absolutely. Yeah.
But own your mistakes and set
Yeah.
the example. And we're all going to fail. Fail fast. You know, you have everybody say fail fast, and put some
Yes.
guardrails to where you can limit it so it doesn't, take the tour bus off of the mountain. Maybe it scrapes it up a bit, but it doesn't take the whole tour bus off the mountain. So,
Yeah.
I
I mean,
see one of the questions: how do we build up a
yeah.
balanced life
Yeah.
among
This is
private life and work? Ooh, that's a good question. That
yes.
isn't that the age-old question? Well, first of all, I don't think that there is such a thing as work-life balance. I really don't.
I
We're one
agree.
person,
Yeah.
and it comes down to priority management. It's not even time management; it's priority
Yeah.
management. And my kids are grown now. It's just me and my wife, and our grandkids are in 7 hours away, unfortunately. So I work many hours, but I still have flexibility, and I can shut things down when my wife needs me. And we found a rhythm that kind of works. And she also knows that, hey, I'm in kind of sales. I help run a CPA firm, and I'm also in charge of business development. So I'm on call a lot. Um, I'm not a doctor. People's lives aren't on the line,
Yeah.
but um, but
Absolutely.
people, when you're dealing with taxes and people's money and helping them grow, because we do help businesses grow, they need help. And so, what I think the biggest thing is to understand what makes you come alive.
Yeah.
Also, be very clear on why were you put on this earth, your core purpose. I
Yes.
boiled mine down in 2003 when I read a book called The Purpose Driven Life by Rick Warren, and it made me write down, well, what's really important. Like, I had to write it down. We all think we know, but I actually
Yes.
wrote it down. And it was to make a positive difference in the lives of others. I have been burned so badly by people that were aligned with me philosophically on a lot of issues, but they still lied and cheated and stole, quite frankly. And so I was like, I don't want to be known as a guy that says one thing, but my wife and children go, oh, but if you just knew.
Yeah.
So the litmus test for me is, am I making a positive difference in the lives of my wife and children, those who know me most intimately, that know the behind the scenes reels, not just the show reels.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then I'm like, okay. And so I look at everything through that lens. I look at everything through that lens, and then everything through the, am I doing the stuff that I love to do? Yeah. I mean, we will do stuff we don't, because work is not called vacation for a reason.
Yeah.
But I do think work should be fun and can be fun when we are more in our thrive column. But we have
Yeah.
to know why in the world we're doing it, because if it's just to get more money, that's a very
Yes,
hollow thing.
absolutely.
Rockefeller said, Rockefeller was the richest man in the world, and people said, "Hey, how much is enough?" And he said, "Just a little bit more."
Yeah,
That's a miserable existence as far as I'm concerned. I mean,
absolutely.
wealthy beyond belief, but I don't want to live like that.
Yeah, that's true. And actually, I love this your advice on uh, finding like your own purpose and having priorities. Like I shared my example, like when I started working from home, basically, and then I realized that actually there is no boundaries of work and life,
Yeah.
personal life. You need to manage everything and prioritize everything. Like for example, if I am working on a report and my clients need it, but at the same time if my kids need me, so like I have to put my report work or my work a little, like aside, and then I have to deal with them. And then once I am like with them, I need to be with them 100%. It's not like need to be mentally absorbed in my report and then like just being with them. So just like you need
Yes.
to shuffle your responsibilities and your priorities in a way that it doesn't make a complete separation in life. We have one day, like 24 hours, and we have one life, and we have to manage everything in a way to do it smoothly. So I completely relate to what you said. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And
And
that's one thing that we're seeing is, especially with the younger generation that's in the workplace now, they want flexibility.
yes,
They demand flexibility, and if you provide no flexibility, they are not going to stay with you. Um,
yes,
and so fortunately we had flexibility, and I never thought, and I am not a CPA, believe me, I don't want to be, but this CPA firm, when they hired me, was so aligned with me in purpose. I saw their core purpose written in. So remember, mine was to make a positive difference in the lives of others. I see to make a difference in the lives of our clients, our teammates, and our community. And I'm like, that sounds a lot like
yeah,
mine. Now, it could have just been words, but I saw that to be true. And they allowed me to be who I am,
yeah,
and operate in my giftings, and we've helped make them a lot of money. But it's
yeah,
because it's fun, and I get to do what I do, and I get to help shape that leadership team and the rest of the company. And we love serving this community of business owners, which is really cool.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, we have another
cool.
question actually,
Yeah.
that like, yeah, most of developed country is not based on talent. It is only a way to get money. So what should we do?
Mm.
So yeah,
Well, that is a hard one, and I agree. In the United States, we're blessed, because many times we have the opportunity to pursue something just outside of need. However, I can tell you this: I have had to do things out of need. I lost everything in 2009 when our private equity firm blew up, and $30 million worth of us got wiped out,
oh,
gone. That's in 2009, and that was called the Great Recession. Nobody was hiring guys that were, my age, late 40s. And so I had to be willing to do a lot of things, and I understand. But here's what is interesting. I have found that just like I was brought into a company that I had no real, they were desperate, and I had some of the things that they needed, but I didn't think that I had what it took. I have seen people take jobs that were way below their pay grade because they had to,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
they proved themselves to be faithful, and they came with batteries installed.
Yeah.
And so that would be one thing that I do say is, like, still be looking for people like that.
Yeah.
And if we're in that situation ourselves, be willing to humble ourselves to take care of our families.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah,
It's
I think
hard.
that's absolutely right. Sometimes we need to actually compromise on certain thing, and then we need to prove ourselves in that role. And then people do realize if we are actually honest with what we do, and if we have that motivation to prove ourselves, it does show, and everybody does recognize then. So I agree with that. So,
Yeah.
anyways, yeah, I think this topic is actually very huge, and we can actually keep on talking on and talking. So, but I'm afraid the time is limited, and
Sure.
we're reaching to the end of the show. So, and I would, before we end the show, what one advice would you like to give to our audience today?
Um, Look at your fingerprint and understand that nobody in the world has ever had one like it, and no one will ever have another one like it either.
Yeah,
I call it being anything but typical because none of us are typical. And I
yeah,
think my advice, and it took me a long stinking time to embrace this fact, because I was always looking and comparing myself with other people. Bad move.
yeah,
Look at that fingerprint and remember, hey, you know what? I was uniquely designed and created. What can I do to make a difference while I've been given breath? And none of us are guaranteed on one day tomorrow or another breath from now. You know, make it worth living, and realize that everybody else is in the same boat.
yeah.
Everybody's in the same boat.
Yeah, actually, you're right. And I think that's, I mean, God has created each and every one of us in a very different way, and we are all unique. And I believe that is our main strength. And when we realize that
Yeah.
we are unique, and one thing that I've seen, like a lot of people want to stand out, but the thing is that they don't have the courage to stand alone. So I think they
Yeah.
need to actually appreciate their uniqueness and have the courage to stand alone, to stand out. Because if you go
Yes.
with everyone, you will never be able to actually stand out, and you will never be able to actually show your uniqueness. So
Yes.
that's one thing that I feel that they should realize. Yeah.
I totally agree. Everybody has a story.
Yeah.
We also have a podcast that me and my much younger business partner started almost 3 years ago now, called the
Wow.
Anything But Typical podcast. So if
Yeah.
anybody likes listening to
Yeah.
entrepreneurs and business owners who are willing to tell their story, we're very picky about who comes on.
Wow.
Um, Listen to just, and it's on any of your podcast channels that you like listening to, but it's called the Anything But
Yeah.
Typical podcast. You will be
Okay.
inspired. We don't monetize it. It was a labor of love, and we love featuring people that are trying to do it right, that are willing to talk about
Awesome.
the difficulties and the mistakes. And
Yeah.
each time I interview somebody, I'm so inspired. So thank you so much for having me on. It's
Yeah.
been a
Thank you
blessing
so.
to do that. And thank you for reaching out. I'm glad that we're connected on LinkedIn. And anybody else listening to this,
Yeah.
connect with us on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Both of us have, I don't know why LinkedIn puts a 30,000 person cap
Yes,
on your
that's the
connections.
problem.
It's a
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
But follow us and we'll follow you. Okay. So
Yeah.
thank you
Do
so
you have
much.
any website or something? So maybe like you can share here. Uh,
LinkedIn is probably the best thing.
okay.
And
Yeah.
it's just Gary Fry.
Yeah.
Um, and that's probably the best place for me. And yeah, you can find me on. Somebody took over my Instagram account. Like, why would somebody want to have Gary Fry? I have no idea, but they
This
hijacked it,
is strange.
and
Oh,
so it's all gone. I
oh,
had a
that's
few
strange.
thousand people on there, not as much as my LinkedIn, but that and the podcast, I think those will be blessings to you. But that way you can, if you have questions or whatever, and you need some
Yeah,
guidance or
your
whatever.
podcast is really inspiring. I did listen to like last couple of few episode, and it's really actually the name itself is so interesting. Anything but typical. That means that I mean the insights you find in at your podcast, we will not find somewhere else. So yes, it's very inspiring and very interesting. So anybody who wants to have some insights which are not typical, please listen to the podcast of Gary Fry. It's very
That's
interesting.
true.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much. And is it pronounced Abreen? Is that
Ambreen,
right?
Ambreen. Yeah, Ambreen.
Abreen. All right.
Yes.
It takes me a while, and I only speak one language, and I don't speak that one all that well. So, thank you so much for having me
Yeah.
on and being a
Thank you
gracious
so
host.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. And I learned a lot, and I'm sure audience have also learned a lot from your experience and your insights. Your journey was really inspiring from the way that you started and the way you build your empire now. It's really inspiring. So thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
sharing your story and your journey with us. So
It's
thank
my
you so
pleasure.
much. Yeah. And
Have
okay,
a
bye bye.
wonderful rest of the weekend.
Yeah, you too, and everyone else who joined us today. Thank you so much for joining. A lot of friends like Samuel and Philip, and so many people have shared the comments. Thank you for sharing the comments and joining us and listening to us today. So thank you and
Yes, thank
goodbye.
you. All right.